thank you all for coming to this, our maiden edition of SFL Insights webinar. My name is Alhamdu, and I am the product specialist for SFL Insights. I suppose since it's our first edition, would like to start by, talking about something that we're already in the business of, but something that we see as that will become a great growth driver for the industry, especially the freight forwarding industry, the supply chain logistics industry, right? And so that's part of the reason why we're going to be talking about tracking and analytics, right? So the idea behind it is that we want to explore leveraging tracking and analytics to gain competitive advantage. And so today we'll just be doing more or less like a surface, a glide through over the history of tracking and analytics, where it is right now, and what the future is going to be. So basically high-level stuff. We hope that, with next editions, we'll probably go deep into it and focus on specific aspects of the industry and, of the technology itself and of the movement. So without much ado, let's start by defining our terms, right? Like, what are we talking about when we say visibility? The most accessible one that I have found that makes sense to me, and I hope it does to you as well, is when we use shipment visibility software tools to follow individual shipments as they traverse or go through the supply chain network, right? So what does this software tool do? It basically collects data. So there's a lot of data that's been generated. That sounds like a big fancy word, but the data that's been generated basically means every time there's an activity going on, what you're going to end up having is you'll find data. So a good idea will be if I take a letter and I pass it on to somebody else. Within the space of time, I have to talk about where the letter is coming from, where the letter is going through, who collected the letter, who transported the letter, and then who's receiving the letter on the other side, right? So what we have is a tool that is able to capture all of this information, right? And give the user or the operator or the freight forwarding industry a very good look at the entire process, right? I will put in another way, shipment visibility of the process of tracking real-time, the real-time status and location and shipments of goods. So it's a very simple concept that we all can understand. And another thing I feel like we needed to point out is within the supply chain industry, within the logistics industry, your currency is always time, right? And if it's your currency, it's also your biggest threat. Because if you're supposed to send a good and you made a promise to your customer that you want to send ABC from one place to another, time is always of the essence. The person who gets who is able to transport the goods or the shipment the fastest, make sure that they clear customs the fastest, and the person who is able to also give the customer information, the right information about where their goods is at the right time, right? Or as quickly as possible. That becomes a currency for you because then you become more reliable. But it's also a threat if the opposite happens, right? So one of the underlying things we will see throughout this presentation is this idea of how do we save time? Because you're in the business of saving time for both your customers, right? And for the consumers and for whoever it is that's in the logistics industry. So what is the evolution of it? Let's just do it. So this whole idea, even though the idea of knowing where our shipments is and able to track them, and the idea of logistics has always been there. I remember I was reading something recently and by a general, and they say all of war is logistics. So as long as old as human beings have been fighting wars, there's always been the need for logistics, right? To know where things are going, how do we distribute them efficiently? Because the more you do that, the more advantage you have over your opponent, right? So this is not a new thing. But in terms of leveraging technology, like using our phones and all of that as a, follow my delivery, it's not been a long time that this whole thing started, right? So even for UPS rolled out follow delivery quite recently, as you can see. Um, Despite the fact that in the startup world, companies or startups such as Uber, Instacart, and Domino's Pizza, in other ways, have been providing package tracking, right? So you can order your pizza and see how it moves, but this never really came into the logistics industry, and largely because it's a big industry and it's old and it's a bit more legacy, and so things moved in there slowly. But we're catching up, right? So throughout history, what has been the thing? I think the one thing I feel we need to understand is the history of visibility is as much the history of technology, right? From smoke signals when you're able to send things, to telegrams, to postal services, telephones, and faxes. At each of this paradigm shift we've had in communication technology and in IT generally, what you end up having is at every point there's a leap in how information is being sent. There's also an entire leap in the logistics industry, right? So again, the idea is time. The faster our communication gets, the better our logistics are. And another thing is the side effect of that we'll deal with much later is the fallout that a lot of data, much more data is also being generated at the same time, right? So now we're into the age of the internet where you have push notification, we have ERP systems, real-time tracking, we have Internet of Things and mobile solutions and all of that. And you can see all of this shift with the more computing power that we have, the easier it is for us to process all of this information, right? So why visibility? What are the challenges that visibility is trying to solve, right? I think there are many, but we'll just highlight a few. First is fragmentation and decision making and communication lines, right? Um, Imagine, let's say, you move from one country to another, and in one country they have 5G, and in another country maybe they have 3G, right? Just based on that, you have a fragmentation in the communication lines, in that one is bound to receive information faster, the other one is going to be a lot slower, right? So this is just one example of some of the fragmentations that we have. Some people use Android, some people prefer to use their desktop, some people use feature phones, some people use smartphones. In each of this, with each fragmentation that you see, you're going to end up that there's a capability that's been lost. And so the challenge in supply chain is if you're using someone or a few people are using smartphones, once you go outside of that network and you want to send information, you either have to send it by email instead of WhatsApp now, or maybe in some ways, maybe let's say you have to use text. No, it doesn't always happen. But as an example, right? Let's say you have to end up using text. Um, the more the communication goes outside of that network, it becomes more fragmented, and you find that your ability to give the fuller picture reduces. So if I have to call and explain, it's going to be different in if I have to send an email, and vice versa. And the other person receiving the information might not have a full picture of it, so they'll make decisions based on the information that they have. And you can begin to see how that begins to kind of raise a lot of problems, right? There's limited collaboration between stakeholders for many reasons. There's information sharing shortage within the industry. There's increasing complexity in supply chain data generation. So the more data you have, the more you need to process it, right? So I only feel bad for anybody who has to kind of do an end of the month report. And the reason for that is imagine compiling all of that data and then bringing it out maybe through tools like Excel and all of that. The more data you have, the longer it is and the harder it is to really take your time and get those insights, right? Another issues that we have is exceptions. We all need more time for exceptions. We all, if we can do without exceptions within our shipments or our freight operations, we would love to do that. So exceptions is one of those things that everyone is looking out for because you want to solve that. And the more you solve that, the faster and more efficient you are. compliance issues across different markets. We're very familiar with all of these issues, right? So if you move from, say, let's say you move from Asia to Europe or to America, you're going to deal with different laws, different customs, different priorities as you move across these markets and jurisdictions. And how do you really work with that? These are some of the problems in the industry, right? And as you can see, so this was a study done by Gartner into the whole thing. And they were, what are the internal obstacles for supply chain companies to achieve their objectives, right? And one of the things you can see is there is a lack of visibility across the supply chain. And one of the things that, and the good analogy is that every time we think about visibility as this way. If there's no light, for instance, everywhere is dark, you can't see. But the more you have, the more light you're able to shed in, in an area, the more you're able to see and the better you're able to kind of understand your situation and know how to navigate across that place, right? So it's a similar thing that we see. So for visibility, every time in your supply chain, you have maybe holes or dark holes, black holes where you don't have a clear visibility of what's happening there. You find that a lot of the time your operations get stuck there. And that's where your inventory, the inventory begins to, and you have a lot of backlog begin to accrue in those places, right? And sometimes it's because nobody's seeing it, so nobody knows that they needed to clear it ahead of time. And that's what visibility provides. You have cross-functional collaboration challenges. This is something I mentioned earlier. Well, then what are the external factors? The external factors that we're seeing is supply chain network complexity. Another one is collaboration between customer and supplier. And as we go into the heart of this presentation, we will cover this aspect as well. So then these are the problems that we've defined, right? So what are the benefits? How is visibility or full stack solution, visibility solution able to solve this problem? So again, the first one is automation, right? When you reduce time spent on repetitive tasks, the fact is, think about it this way. If you have a customer that specifically likes to call because they want to know where their shipments are, or they want to know what milestones have been kind of covered and how far their shipments are going across the whole supply chain, the more you find that, the more you have customers like that, the more it takes away time from your operations team. So because they have to ask, oh, where is my questions, right? They have to ask all of this. They have to answer and make sure that your customer is always aware of it. Now, this is where visibility can basically do that. Right now, we have live vessel tracking. We have tracking through milestones in a TMSs like CargoWise, and you have all of these workflows that you can sort of integrate, right? And the reason why we want to do more automation is so that if we can reduce those time-consuming tasks, it frees up the operations team, the marketing team, and the sales team to really put in their mind and come up with better solutions, right? Or better ways to help your customers or to move the operations as quickly as possible. So, another gain that you'll have is that it increases sales. You're increasing customer satisfaction. It makes you nimble, right? We're talking about exceptions earlier, or let's say customs have stopped one of your shipments because of a document that is missing, for instance. What you can do is if you have a good visibility, like something that is mobile and it's available on your mobile phone, as your customer could basically look in and say, okay, I need to give in this document. And if the document is on their phone, they could quickly upload it, right? Or they could use their phone as a scanner. The thing is, technology is moving in this direction, that by adopting and automating visibility as platforms are beginning to give customers real tools that allows them to be very independent and mobile, right? Another one is, you could achieve that everything that we're all looking for, that perfect order index, reduce the amount of risks across the supply chain, right? Because if you're able to see where your goods are, you're able to know, to determine whenever there's an issue there, you're able to kind of solve it quickly. as quickly as possible. So you're able to mitigate a lot of the risks, right? And it helps you meet regulatory compliance as well. And so who are those that benefit? So let me put it this way. In a very simple way, the customers will love having everything, you know, in one easy to use platform, because now they get to see where their shipments are. And part of a good example is if you consider how much the return on investment that Domino's Pizza got when they added this track my pizza, right? When they did that, that was really revolutionary. And a lot of people figured, oh, if I can do it and then track it on the platform, it made them feel much more secure. And so what you'll have is you have a deeper customer satisfaction. Then your sales team will have a tool of, a flashy technology to help them sort of win new clients. And then your operations team will love the extra time that's been saved to them, right? So that they can function on work on their higher value clients. So what is the future of visibility? And this is where I think we'll talk about some of the issues like complexity and how we're able to kind of run with it, right? So the future of visibility of both tracking. So as in the past, let's say 5 years, what we have seen is we have seen a lot of unexpected things like COVID, which disrupted just-in-time manufacturing a lot, right? We've seen things like war reshaping the entire supply chain and the shipping routes, and even flights have been redirected and rerouted through different countries. These are not things that we can foresee quickly. But the question is, if we're able to have more data and more information, the question now is, can we use that to sort of solve the problem, right? Or at least can we anticipate the problem in a way that allows us to solve it quicker and resolve these issues quicker? Okay. Right. We've had things like the uncertainty of the dollar, and right now with the financial crisis and inflation cutting into freight forwarders, profit margins. You know, and we've had like so basically the idea of of also onshoring, which came up because of COVID and a lot of other issues that we're seeing. In fact, right now, I think one of the problems is there's a lot of backlog, but also the rates are also very low, right? So the question is, can we gather all of this data historically in such a way that it helps us predict the future and it helps us plan for events, or at least be more resilient in that sense, right? So what is the future of visibility? I think most of you can see it. It's basically business intelligence, right? Question is, how can we merge transport management systems with visibility and then with artificial intelligence? The question is, how do we take the power of computing and then go through this huge amount of data that I mentioned earlier, is being generated right across the entire supply chain. But not only that, it's not enough to have the data, but how do we take this and then turn them into useful insight for us, right? That will help us make better decisions, but it will also help us maintain better customer relations. So early on, so let's talk about the future and why it's, this whole move is very necessary, and why I feel like, why I think freight forwarding companies need to plug into this as quickly as possible. Like I said, time is always of the essence, right? So the quicker you get on this, the better. So the future of visibility, complexity of logistics and software, as a simplifier. So like we said, more data has been generated, and with every disruption in the supply chain, you're also going to have more data, right? Um, that you have to kind of contend with. How do we understand this data in all of this? So the idea is software as a simplifier. And again, by complexity, let me be very clear. What I mean is complexity does not mean complicated, but rather that it describes the condition of interconnectedness, interdependencies across the network, where a change in just one element can affect it. We've seen this, especially in the past 5 years. We've seen how this has really upended a lot of our lives, right? Where things we didn't even consider before were affected by this. A good one, I think, for me is the idea of like I was watching something about how Anchorage had to sort of move, along the years with the opening of Russia. Anchorage became a good stopping point for flights between Asia and the America, and then now we're having the reverse because Russia is going through that, right? So you can see how a change in the status of one country and another has affected the entire supply chain and is also affecting the incomes of cities and all of that. So these are things we can't anticipate, but at least we can build resilience around it. Because the problem now that we're having is, especially due to the last 5 years, a lot of businesses are forced to do things like onshoring, right? And and the idea is they need to choose between being efficient and also being resilient. So in case there's anything, but that also means that they're kind of piling up on inventory. And if there's a change in the market, they may not be able to respond as quickly. So the question is, how do we find this balance for our customers or for the industry at large? And so what to do with the data? So in terms of the supply chain, as it's getting more and more complex, and it produces more data, more faults, and the ability to, like I said, to process that data into useful insight and actionable insight will determine the winners and the losers. And that's just the truth, is whoever is able to get the useful answers on time or insights on time and is able to act on it on time will more likely be ahead of the market, right? So with more visibility, what you're going to have is, because you can see the system, you can see the data, and you can see where your goods are in all of across the entire chain. You're more aware of what's happening, right? And then you're more aware of what could potentially happen, and you respond quicker. And with that knowledge, you're better able to make your system more efficient, right? And it becomes more predictable. And there's nothing business likes or an economy likes more than a stable business environment or a predictability by which we can make decisions around, right? So, secondly, your goods will arrive safely, undamaged, or on time. You can remain agile through market shift. And this has to do with our ability to take those big, large chunks of data and even do things like carrier analysis, shipment analysis, intermodal analysis, right? To figure out which carriers are more efficient, which mode of transport better fits this particular good. All of these are data and insights that we're able to produce. And with these insights, we get it leads to better decision making. Just consider the fact that if your customer is coming to you and they say, okay, I want to ship, I'm a pharmaceutical company, the chemicals I need are time bound, right? I need them to come in as quickly as possible. And they are doing, okay, we'd rather if you airlift them to us. But even with the airlift, they'll say, okay, maybe you should use this airline over this, because based on our analysis, we've noticed that these guys are able to clear faster, they have less demurrage and all of these issues going on. And now when when customers are coming to um, make bookings and whatever, they're coming in well informed and they know what they want, right? So save everybody's time and make it more efficient. And also allows your customers to plan for capacity shifts and also for you to plan for capacity shift. So if you know that the economy is kind of slowing down, you can predict that based on certain historical, you can say, okay, maybe this is the time for us to maybe increase our pricing, make our pricing more competitive. How do you respond to the market when it changes? That is one of the things that visibility can offer, right? And it also helps you look into your operation and you're able to see these are where we have the bottlenecks, and you can figure out how you can make those bottlenecks more efficient, right? So better accuracy and compliance and better insights into, like I said, your carrier performance and shipments and all of that. So sharing risk, another advantage, so we're winding down now. Another advantage that we have is, you get to share risk. There is always this radical transparency and automation that comes with it, right? Because if you have more transparency across the supply chain and your customers are able to see how well you're able to kind of clear their goods across all of these things and they're able to see your performance, it helps you sell better to them because they have more confidence in you. So you kind of diversify the risk. You're better able to kind of predict what's in the market, and you can create buffers for maybe you notice the market might not be good going further. So when the market happens, how does that affect our shipments? When it is, when we notice maybe in a pandemic, how did that affect our ability to transport goods during war when we had to divert? What are these particular instances that are happening, and how do we better respond to them? So when they happen again in the future, you're better able to create buffers and solutions around and work around them, right? So the key takeaway for me today is basically our key takeaways today will be today. Again, visibility is no longer a privilege. It is a reasonable, perfectly justified expectation. So if your customers are asking you about this, just know that it's a reasonable thing. It's good for your business. It's also good for them, right? And because they get to see what's happening, and sometimes it saves you a lot of time from explaining to them. Tracking technology has also come a long way and is constantly evolving, especially these days, with the web, with artificial intelligence coming in, with big data, and our ability to kind of crunch big data and get insights out of them, with business intelligence tools. All of this creates a lot of possibilities for making the entire industry better and for making your operations and freight forwarding operation better as well. Okay. So finally, what do we consider when we're choosing good? I feel this is the last nugget. You want something that integrates with your CMS, TMS seamlessly. You need a vendor that you can trust that has a record of, data security, because again, the security and the privacy of your data and those of your customers is very important. Of course, deployment cost. Is it cloud-based? The good thing about cloud-based is that it makes you far more nimble, and I think it's less expensive and less overhead for you than say when you're hosting it internally. But again, this is subject to your operations and the style in which you run your operations and what's expected of you, right? And what your customers expect as well. Does it have a mobile application? This is very good for the marketing team because they can always sell it to the customer and say, hey, you can track anything on your phone. Ease of use, very important, because now you're bringing in your customers and other stakeholders into the entire to have a good view of the shipment process, right? So you want the tool to be as easy for them to use as possible. Conditional awareness, is it aware of things like changes in your ETAs and exceptions and demurrage and all of that? And then automated analytics, both historical and predictive. The reason for historical is because we learn the most from the past, but predictive is because we learn from past so that we're able to make better decisions about and plan better for the future. The analytics aspect of SFL Insights, right? Just to give you an example of what we're able to do with better analytics, and of some of the features that you should kind of expect when you're going for visibility solutions. Because early on, as we said, it's not just enough to give your customers the ability for them to see their goods move from one place to another, right? Or their shipments move from one place to another. It's not just enough to do that. It's a lot of customers are demanding for more right now. They want to see things like historical data, if you can see here. So that is shipment wise. Same thing. So things when they see the tonnage, for instance, you see they're able to better see, oh, it seems like I send a lot of things by air. Is that the reason why the cost is high? Or is this something that they come to expect? So it helps them look into it and say, okay, when I'm making my orders or when I'm making my bookings, how do I better work with that? Another thing that we're seeing is people are even integrating things like their carbon emission and their carbon footprint into it, right? So one of the analytics that could be provided for them is you look at all of their logistics operations and all the shipments that they make, and you can give them and say, okay, based on this, this is how much carbon that you have. For others, they go ahead and they buy a carbon offset based on that, right? But these are all things you can build right into visibility tools that works well for your clients. So we can do things like carrier analysis. You can see the average transit time across different carriers. In this case, what you can see is you can see things like detention, demurrage. You can also do KPIs. So for freight forwarders, that maybe you extend credits to your customers, and you want to find out maybe your customers want to also find out, oh, how often, what's my performance in terms of paying my freight forwarding agent or my logistics company, and how is that affecting their operations? They could come here and basically add that as something they get to see. So they will say, okay, maybe out of 300 invoices that you have, you have a clearing rate of like 80%, right? I think it builds for better collaboration, and it makes both you and the client more transparent. And the fact of the matter is, based on all the research that we've seen, either if it's from Gartner or any of the leading industry researchers, have shown that with more transparency and more visibility, the industry gets much better. I mean, gets more efficient and much more effective in transporting goods. So basically, this is part of what we have. And SFL Insights is part of our tool, of the bigger tools that we actually offer here at SFL. So at any point, if you want to know more about us and you want us to consult for you, because what we do offer is we have about over 10 years of experience within the industry, and of also servicing CargoWise One customers and clients and all of that. So we took all of this knowledge, right, and experience that we've gathered over the years, and we use that to build a tool like this for freight forwarders and all of that. So I think so far that was just a quick glimpse into what we can do with analytics and the kind of information, how we can make things easier for you. So thank you everyone for your time.